Now, for our next surprise. My dear brother, Kevin Brown, said that this moment would be epic. Kevin played the role of Gordon Parks, and for me was an 8-year labor of love. The production of Parks, a portrait of a young artist, which just closed a few weeks ago at the History Theater here in St. Paul. We talk about we miss each other so, but he brilliantly portrayed Uncle Gordon, the young Gordon Parks. And along with my brother, Kyle Johnson, the only two men that played Uncle Gordon in the world, is here with us also this afternoon. So I'm going to ask my dear brother Kyle and my dear brother Kevin to join me. I couldn't think of two better people to talk about walking in Uncle Gordon's footsteps than these two amazing men. If you would join us. Rear up. You can all sit up. Miss Robin, I'm going to change with you. Okay, thank you so much. I'll get in the middle. I guess I'll get in the middle. I'm going to hush at this point. Ooh, epic. Epic. I am not going to talk much, but I had the great honor. I have a wonderful photograph of me at 6 months old. My mother was brilliant. She propped me up on some pillows and put in my lap a copy of The Learning Tree. And for Uncle Gordon's 90th birthday, I framed that picture up and I sent it to him and I said, Uncle Gordon, I was a baby prodigy. At 6 months, I began researching the documentary of your life. And he called me and said, I know that's right, baby. I know that's right. And loved him, love you too. This is something. And again, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for coming. I had the honor of being in Fort Scott last October, and Kyle, to meet you, and you received the Gordon Parks Award there, the Choice of Weapons Award, and so it was just such a joy. And again, I want our choice. Our scholars had a chance to watch the film. The way that the film and the play resonates with young people is just amazing. So I'm sure my brother would say, you don't look any different than you did in the movie with your gray hair. That's what the students say. But for to, again, the experience, for both of you, like you talk about, but for you to talk about the film, I want to hear from the audience because I'm not asking a lot of questions because I'm still in awe of just being here. But the journey for you, I watched you as you watched the film. Here you are, you watch with such intensity. How old were you when you began this journey, not only seeing yourself, but walking with Uncle Gordon, not just playing the role in this autobiography of Gordon Parks, but walking with the man?
Well, the journey began, actually my mother, some of you might know, she's Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek. And as still in the early part of her career, she had established herself and was, had appeared in, various TV and film roles. And she had come across the book, The Learning Tree, and of course read it. And if you've read the book, it's a fictionalized biography. But the first thing that came to her mind is, if he doesn't make this movie too quick, Kyle will be old enough to play the role. So I guess I was about maybe 13 or 14 when she gave me the book, and she didn't say much about it. She just said, oh, this is a great book. You ought to read this, which I did, and I agreed. But I wasn't thinking on it in the terms that she was at the time. So it was a few years later, at least a couple of 3 years, I guess, and I was in my last year of high school, and I got a call from my agent. I'd been working as an actor since I'd been 7 or 8 years old. And so the agent called up and he said, well, there's a project that's going in, that's being considered, and the director is in town, and he would like to meet with you. And I did not, as I recall, make the connection then about Gordon, the author, and Gordon, as it turned out to be, the director. So he was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, had a bungalow, which is distinct even from having a suite. And so I was, informed that I could meet him. The time was set. And up to that point, as a young actor, I had never had occasion to actually meet with a director as part of an interview process. Typically it's in an office, and there's, when you get there, there's, 6 or 8 other people that are reading for the part, and a casting agent, and, hustle and bustle, and they give you a couple of sheets, and you look at it, and, you got maybe 10 or 15 minutes to read it over and think of what you're going to do. And you go in and read, and they, the response is always, oh, that was wonderful. Oh, thank you very much for coming. And yes, we'll be in touch. And so my mother had told me about that experience, many years before that. She said, look, when you go out on an interview, you pay attention, you listen closely to what they say, because they may say something that's really going to give you an insight into what they're looking for, or what the character is about, and there will be things that they will leave out on purpose, because they just want to get kind of your spontaneous reaction. So I kept that in mind, and she said, the other thing, the conclusion was that you go in, you do the best that you can, and then they're going to say that was great and we'll call you back. And then you walk out of there and you forget about it immediately. Do not give it another thought, because if they're interested, you will be the first one to know. And if not, you won't hear anything ever. So I had never been in a situation where you'd heard about it. Oh, when I first met the great director, or well, when I saw her, I knew that she was the one, or whatever it was. I just walked in and expected that, well, maybe he's going to ask me. I guess he's going to ask me to read. And Mr. Parks, and those of you, I know that there are some of you here that know him personally, and is kind of understated, kind of soft-spoken manner, and he says, yes, Kyle, yes, I've heard good things about you, and I'm glad you could be here today, and that we could talk a little bit. And so we talked. He said, tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I'm in high school, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've played this role and that role. And he says, oh, yeah, that's good. Then he got to really what mattered. And he said, can you swim? I said, yeah, I can swim. I'm not the world's best swimmer. I'm not going to the Olympics, but I can swim. And he said, oh, that's good. And then he said, can you ride a horse? And I said, well, yeah, actually I can. I've often go horseback riding. I'd gone to summer camp. It was out in the desert, and that's what we did. Is a lot of horse riding and going on trips through the desert on horseback. So he said, "Yeah, okay." And we talked a little bit further, and then he said, "Well, that sounds fine." And okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch. So I said, okay, and I walked out, and I forgot about it. But I didn't forget about it for too long, because next thing I knew, I get a call, and this is another thing that had never happened before. I was being informed that they were going to do a screen test. So I, showed up at Warner Brothers, and, and went into wardrobe. They did makeup and so forth, and the screen test was, I think, was with Estelle Evans, who played my mother, Gordon's mother. And we went through the screen test, and same thing. Gordon said, "That's nice, Carl. Thank you very much, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon." So the next week, I get another call for another screen test. And this one was, I don't know if it was the most important one, but I'm not surprised it was toward the top of the list. This was a scene with my brother. It was the scene behind the barn when, after Booker had killed the farmer, and we're discussing it, and he says, "Well, it's a good thing that you don't know anything about it, because now you don't have to say anything." It was that scene, which of course is on horseback. So got that one out of the way. And I had another with Myra Waters, who played Arcella, and also one with Big Mabel. So, I think that was pretty much covered it all, but I was going like, can this guy make up his mind or not? I was just simply the last one to know that he had cast me at the very first meeting in the bungalow. And he wanted to kind of catch the vibe. He had seen things that I had already done. He'd seen film of my previous performances and so forth. And no one actually, informed me that, yes, you have the part, and the screen tests were actually for the other characters, the other actors, and the horseback riding, of course. So anyway, that's kind of how I came to know him. So I had a little bit more, even though I didn't realize it quite in real time, I had a little bit more insight to him as a person as a result of that, before I'd even seen the script. And, but the next call that came after that is, you're going to Fort Scott and you leave on September 3rd, you have 10 days, or something like that. So that's kind of how I came to know Gordon a little bit more as a person than simply someone else in the film industry that, you meet lots of people in the film industry, but Gordon was definitely a unique individual, and certainly precious to me for having gotten to know him. Yeah.
The chemistry, very powerful, deep. I mean, you can look at, photos from, the photography from the making of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And the chemistry between the two of you. But see, this is another thing, too. The personal stories that I received from my uncle about you. That man loved you. He really, really loved you. You mentioned a few things. I'm connecting again to the being in Fort Scott with you in October. I mean, it's always really something, and Jamie can attest to this. When we were there with the students, it's just phenomenal. What was funny when the scholars went, they saw the movie before we went, and I'll tell you what they were. Are we going to get to meet Big Mabel? It does not matter what generation. a young man being able to see a scene where a young man gets to have a love scene with an older woman. I swear, am I lying, Jamie? We get to meet Miss Mabel. Now, how old is Miss Mabel now? They did not care because she was there, you know?
Yes,
and
yes.
she still had that appeal.
Yeah.
And she loved those young boys up, and they were sprung. They were sprung. It was just still a very magical place. Even Stevie, when he was watching the movie, was at the lake that we saw, but being there with you was something. I just want to share this point to bring Kevin in. To watch the scene of great grandma passing and the casket in the house and Uncle Gordon having that moment. And I had to look over at Kevin because we have that scene in the play. And how did you feel, Kevin, that same scene in the play? How are you feeling, first of all, being with Kyle, but seeing, I know you saw the learning tree in prep for the play, but just how you feeling? And that particular scene, which brought tears to my eyes, seeing it with the two of you. But that's when I cried in the play, seeing that particular scene.
I was a little starstruck, first and foremost, especially after just watching it and being like, oh my God, he's right here. But with that scene specifically, that's one of the most emotional scenes in the play. And it comes right at the beginning. And what was touching me as I was watching this, and of course I didn't realize this when I was watching it in prep, was even our blocking was pretty similar, like how we had the casket set up and everything, and how you went to it is exactly how I moved to it. The only thing that we couldn't do, which I wanted to do, was lift the casket. You know, you actually lift it and look in, but pretty much everything else was the same, how I stayed the night with it and wept over it. So it brought me right back to the scene. It was kind of like making me sad again. Even though it's, you know, a character I play, those emotions you feel when you play it are very real.
Your preparation for becoming Gordon Parks, you know, and not being able to walk with the man, but you kind of did, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I took it seriously because I knew that Gordon Parks was a real person, and I didn't have the opportunity to meet him and work with him like you did, which would have been amazing. But I had a lot of videos. There's a lot of videos. There's a recording of him reading A Choice of Weapons, of Gordon reading it, which is amazing for me as a person who's trying to play him, to hear how he says his story, you know? Because it's one thing to read it, but to hear him tell it was huge. I watched the movies. I just tried to soak up everything I could. I wish I could have met him, though. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
I just feeling it. We had such a good time yesterday with the screening of Half Past Autumn, the life and work of Gordon Parks, and being able to sit here and be in conversation with my brother Craig Rice, and even watching the doc again yesterday.
Robin, use your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yesterday I had great questions for Kevin, but he answered them. But we had the screening of Half Past Autumn, the life and work of Gordon Parks yesterday, and the director Craig Rice is here, and we had a great conversation. But watching the documentary again yesterday, and even seeing, you know, images of Uncle Gordon young, and I know he won't do it, but my brother, I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, my brother Kadar is here, and if you want to see Uncle Gordon young, I mean, I know Kadar would not come up on the stage, but if he had that bushy mustache, you would be seeing my Uncle Gordon, because Kadar, straight up, you know, so he's not here with us, but he kind of is through Kadar, because we were in New York visiting the Kadar. We were there, and I think he told Kadar, yeah, Billy, you know, you look like me. So, but it is, I feel that sweet, sweet spirit and presence, you know, of him right now. I just really do feel Uncle Gordon's presence. But like I said, I've heard the story. I know. I've heard stories about it. A lot of folks Uncle Gordon walked with, you know, in the films and whatever. He loved you. One of the things that's very important too, and I've talked about it after some of the talkbacks after the play. I talked about it yesterday, especially relevant to today in the industry, which is very important if you want to talk about Gordon Parks' legacy as a filmmaker, and his being the first ever Life magazine, Vogue magazine, first Black director in Hollywood with the Learning Tree. But he wasn't content with being the only first. behind the camera as a director.
Yeah, very much so. One of the other effects that he had, and an enduring one, is the number of black technicians and those behind the camera, crew members, makeup artists, drivers, set construction, camera, all of that. Many of those, the way that works in Hollywood is you have to basically get so many days of work within a certain period in order to qualify to be a union member. And, it wasn't atypical that people could work for years, 10 years, and never get enough work consistently that they still might pick up a job here and there, but they couldn't wind up getting a union card. Well, all of a sudden, overnight, there were just a lot more black people in the various, support unions that make it possible to make motion pictures. When the film was announced, and even before I became aware of it, or certainly before our meeting, there had been negotiations between Gordon and the studio and Fort Scott itself, which was, initially not ready for prime time, but it just occurred at a period of time when the old guard was fading, and younger, newer people that were not as saddled with what they grew up with were coming into positions on, within the economy, within the government, within, civic organizations and so forth. And the old guard were still holding on to that disposition that they had had all of these years. Gordon had some serious conflicts and disagreements with, for instance, how his parents' graves were maintained. And all others in the cemetery were typically, the black cemetery, the white cemetery, etc. That was an issue to him, and it was long before he had any issue with, the matter of the film was even part of the picture. This is going back to when he first, became known as an artist through Life magazine, etc. And so that had been, a sore spot for many years prior to the film. And when he started becoming better known for his work in Life magazine, interviewing, Muhammad Ali, photographing, the civil rights movement, all of those classic black and white photos from the 60s that really tell the story of America. And they were apprehensive that he's now become a militant. And, they had those concerns that it would somehow, he would cause trouble. But when this new wave of young people, again, mostly white in Fort Scott, came along, their reaction was, wait a minute, let me get this straight. Warner Brothers is talking about coming here with a crew of over 100 people and book up every hotel room in town, and they're going to be here for 3 months, and they're going to be buying stuff from the hardware store and this, that, and the other, and hiring people to perform other services, and you don't want that to happen?
Right. Wow.
It was just a kind of a moment like that that caused things to change, just like that. And it also, when we were preparing to, to go to Fort Scott, particularly, I think everybody on the crew had an awareness of the importance of the film an historical importance, and the importance of it being well done and it succeeding. And as black people, of course, you know, know that we're going to be kind of under a microscope, so everybody's, you know, kind of on their best behavior and, you know, with an awareness of what some mischance, how that could impact the entire project. But the thing was that by the time we got there, that change that I'm speaking of had already started to go into effect. And by the time we left, the people, both black and white, in Fort Scott, you know, were now genuinely sorry to see us leave, because so many of them we came to know. You know, we're eating in the same restaurants, we're walking up and down the same streets, we're, you know, and sharing in the experience of the movie, because lots of the local people were included in the cast. The woman who was the bearded lady at the carnival, she was the wife of one of the richest people in town. And she had the time of her life. It was just so, you know, it had that kind of personal effect as well. And even after we left, the people that we had struck up relationships with, and, you know, telephone calls or letters, those things you used to write, those exchanges continued, and the black people in the town said, this is truly remarkable. We feel like we've advanced, you know, 100 years almost overnight. There was no way. They could not, once people had seen and felt, experienced, engaged in relationships that were respectful and acknowledged everybody's worth,
Wow.
there was no way to go back. Wow. There was no way to go back.
Wow.
And, you know, the civil rights matters, you know, writ large continue, obviously, to this day. But in that place and at that time, something changed, and it did not change back. So that was something that we were all felt that we were privileged to be a part of, that we played a role in making that change.
It's amazing.
So, yeah.
Oh, see, and DEI training can't do that. I mean, and it's about relationship building. We talked a little bit about that yesterday when Craig talked about the team that made the first HBO documentary on Uncle Gordon's life, what the crew looked like.
Yeah.
Again, if you're going to do something about Gordon Parks, in the spirit of Gordon Parks, and you have to do it in the way he would have done
Like
it.
Gordon Parks.
Like Gordon Parks.
Yes.
It was the same way with the play. I talked about it when, you know, being able to walk with the black playwright, Harrison Rivers, and the
First black director I ever worked with.
was who?
Talvin Wilkes.
Yes.
Amazing.
Music director,
Yes.
Darnell Davis.
Yes.
Set designer, Say2 Jones.
Two. Yeah.
Amazing
Top to
cast, yeah, and I love my brother Lotter Hugh, Ryan Palooza of History Theater, you know. But when you know you do that, and I talked often about, that's what it looks. This is what it looks like when Black Lives Matter, you know. And I love, again, my brothers and sisters of Lotter Hugh who support what it really looks like when Black Lives Matter. That means black folks taking their rightful place in telling their narratives. That's authenticity. Right? That's what you get. You can't, DEI training can't do that. We talk about the credits. Yesterday I tell all of my students, media making students, watch the credits after the movie, because you're looking at the names of the people who work sometimes more than the people in front of the camera. I said yesterday, I'm coining this, it's not about the emotions, it's about the economics. Those are people that are then being able to support their families and support their communities. And I know, and then two, you're getting paid, and you can then do the next project and the next project. You have the resources to continue to write the plays and the books and make the movies. That's it. And then you have something as powerful as this. And whenever I see the Learning Tree and some of other, next week it's Lead Belly. He had to fight to do Lead Belly with the integrity. The integrity to tell that man's story. That's another powerful, powerful story. And I knew, and then Solomon Northup's Odyssey, the first 12 Years a Slave movie, that was done by a man who was a descendant of slaves. That was done by Uncle Gordon. You know, and so, but to see the learning tree again, where it was unapologetic of telling a true story about the Black experience. Y'all, you gotta, I don't mind, I love walking in partnership. But let us do us. So that then my scholar can tell his story. I expect a story from you, my brother. I expect that of you all. You're already lifting up your vision. So in spite of all they have to deal with and see on the news about themselves, we walk with them, huh, Jamie? And at first day of class, they're all quiet. But by the end of that third week, they're standing up and lifting up visions of peace, possibilities, power, and purpose. Because they're walking in Uncle Gordon's footsteps. Should we open it up for... Let me say this last fun thing. Since my brother, he gave the surprise out. Tomorrow, these two brothers will be at Gordon Parks High School for a learning tree planting ceremony. There will be a learning tree planted at Gordon Parks High School. Can I ask if our scholar your first question can go to you. He brought his mama and his brother for Mother's Day.
My question is for, no, that's what I call you, sorry. How long did it take you to mentally prepare the fact that you were going to be walking and doing a movie with Gordon Parks himself about his own self? Like, how did that feel?
You're going to see something else about one of the other characters, not about your character, but something about the other character that, why is he saying this to this person? So you're going to have to think about that other character and why this scene is happening and how does it advance the story. And then you're going to go back and read the script again, and you're going to see something that completely escaped you the first time. And you're going to go just through several rounds of that. And then when you get there and kind of the cast gathers and there are questions back and forth, and that's another kind of round of consideration that helps in the process. And then you're going to get a call and you're going to go out on the set and you're going to shoot whatever scene is the first scene. In our case, it was the storm scene was one of the first things. I think before that we did some of the stuff, the titles, when the lead titles, when I'm walking through the field and turning somersaults and kind of being a 15-year-old kid. I was pretty buff then too. I was going. Is that what? I never noticed that before. Really, that I was, I was kind of thin but wiry, and so it's just a voyage of discovery, and you kind of enter into it with your eyes open and your mind open and your emotions available, and then once it gets quiet on the set and they say action, something else happens, and that's what winds up on film. So it's a process. It wasn't something that I did so deliberately in terms of preparing, as much kind of just going through the essentials and the mechanics of it. And when you have control of the mechanics, then it kind of frees you up to actually engage without thinking about the mechanics. So that's how it kind of works for me, yeah.
Thank you. I look forward to asking you a lot more questions tomorrow because I'm
All
going to be
right.
with them tomorrow.
Please.
We're opening up questions, audience, please. We're here.
What does ASJ mean on the credits? The producer? ASJ. When you look at credits of the movie,
The ASJ?
yeah.
ASJ.
Was that, who was that in, that was in the end credits?
Yeah, on credits on TV, you always see it.
ASJ? Oh,
it's the union. Is he talking about the
yeah.
Yeah, it may be. I was just thinking American Society of whatever. I don't know that that's exactly what you're referring to, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah. And Mr. Cunningham, I want to thank you for always showing up for everything I do. My brother from Rondo community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Always, always, always showing up. Rondo, I want you to know too, great grandparents really poured into Uncle Gordon, but also the Rondo community. He's from Rondo. You know, you need to know that. You know, St. Paul, Rondo community. So this is my brother from Rondo. But there we go. 67, right on, Brother Cunningham.
And-
Questions and yes. I'm
Yeah, and also if you have any observations about the film, I know that today as I was watching it, again, you feel your response to it is, I see it from time to time. You know, it's not something like I go back and look at it once a week, but there are things in the film that kind of struck me today just because of events in the world that are current. And if there are things that you might, have made observations about something in the film that resonated with some of these things that we're all experiencing now, feel free to comment. I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Well, I had a question before that. In the shooting of it, each scene, the point is made so clearly. I mean, the scenes just
Yes.
continue on, but it's really a tight, clean.
Yeah.
And was that the way it was shot, or did a lot of it get edited, or how did it
No,
work
it
that
was
way?
pretty much in the. It was pretty much in the script, but it was also, again, the people you work with animate what's on the page, and once you start engaging with them and that relationship, like I was saying, when you're trying to figure out, why am I saying to this person, or what's that supposed to produce in terms of what you see on the screen. So the people, the relationship that you develop with the cast and with the director, and even with the lighting and the cameraman, because again, when you understand the mechanics, it frees you up to do your real work. Yeah. So yeah, it was very, very tightly written, but Gordon, he knew it was going to be right because he was there.
You talked about observation.
Mm-hmm.
I was here yesterday for the documentary,
Uh-huh.
and I noticed his pipe, and it didn't resonate with me at the time, but when I watched the movie last night, and then I saw it again today, and I encourage everybody to watch it more than once, and over and over. Anyway, that pipe, that dad,
Yes.
it was the same design,
Uh-huh.
the same, it had that little curve to it.
Uh-huh.
That Gordon.
I'm sure Gordon gave it to him. Gordon was not only obviously a photographer, writer, now director, but Gordon cut my hair. You're doing these things out of sequence, right? So you can't have, too long here and too short there. And he was the person who actually cut my hair to make sure that was consistent. That element was consistent when you're doing things that are out of sequence. Or, oh, no, we have to go back and add these scenes. This is, 2 different locations. It was one day, it was in the script, it was at this location, and then the follow-up next day is another, so that has to match. So he did that, and of course wrote the music. I mean, he is indeed, it's not an overstatement to call him a Renaissance man. He is, he was made, either the term was made for him or he was made to meet that term, and he certainly was.
See, I learned something new. I didn't know he was a barber, too. People don't know he was a chef. As I shared yesterday, you could not take him out to dinner, ever. He always cooked. He swore he was a chef, too. I mean, I know a barber. I did not know that.
Fascinating.
Do you think he did his own hair, that process? I mean, I don't know.
I'd be curious to know if while you were doing the movie, was Gordon clear that you were playing him, or was he never like upfront about that? Because in the book, it's not necessarily, clearly him and the learning tree.
No, it was, it was explicit, of course.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even with the haircuts, I guess, while he was telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kyle, I know you talked about, when you're doing the movie and you had to do stuff, over again and things, but once it's done, it's done. But then I always wonder about when you're doing the play and you have to, I wonder if people doing it over again. You got to do it the next night, do it over again and over again. Does it get, I don't know, what is it, redundant? Does it get
dry, redundant?
Yeah, whatever.
No, I mean, part of doing theater is keeping it fresh, every night. But especially with this story and walking with Robin and hearing her stories about her uncle, I felt like I was actually learning more about Gordon, which informed my performance. So it never really got stale for me because I was like, I know more now, so I can make this choice. I know more. So yeah, it never really got stale.
Thank you. Misha.
Lights, you can't see.
The second, here it comes.
I want to give a shout out to my junior high school buddy Robin up here in the audience there. You're a friend from junior high.
Picture of Gordon Parks for you.
Okay.
Telling Craig, my father, he was a mentor to my father, was a photographer.
Oh.
And he went to his New York apartment and there's a picture, so I was going to give it to you.
Oh,
That's all I need to say.
You were talking about details, and I noticed the photographer in him placed the presidential portraits in the principal's office. It was Thomas Jefferson with his freighted history, and then in the courthouse it was Abraham Lincoln. And I'm just wondering what your take on that is. And I'm not sure if it was intentional, but next to the Jefferson portrait in the principal's office, I swore I saw a noose and a curtain string. So I don't know. I'm sure that was not intentional, but just the placement of the portraits.
I don't remember that I've given it any thought, but when I was inviting comment, I was thinking particularly of the courtroom scene with what we've seen on television in the past few years, the George Floyd, the jogger that was killed, and just there was a certain resonance in what the judge said at the end that I've seen the movie, over the decades, a few dozen times. And that, just seeing it now and hearing him say that and knowing what's going on with the Supreme Court, do these guys even get it? You can't, well, I certainly can't help but think about that. The simplest words, which we've heard before, not just in this film, but any number of people would speak about the justice system from time to time, and I'm sure that we all have, our references that on that topic. But it can't be said, apparently, often enough, because the very people that sit on the Supreme Court don't seem to get it. I'm going to stray from our subject just a little bit. Not only do I think that the Trump appointees lied in those Senate hearings, I think that they should not be criticized. I think they should be impeached. I think they should be removed from office. And our democracy is in grave danger if this is allowed to pass. And I would say one thing even further than that. They're not only dishonorable, they are not only liars, but they are so morally bankrupt that they should be condemned for having accepted the nominations from Donald Trump and never having said a word about the process that they imposed on Merrick Garland. I've given this a lot of thought, and I feel that if we cannot think of it in those terms, whether it actually comes about is one thing or another. But if we cannot confront that, if we have someone where the process is so corrupt that these people have bought those seats on the bench, they bought them. If we can't acknowledge and condemn that, our moral and democratic, small d, souls are at risk. And that's what I was seeing in that courtroom scene when the judge admonished that crowd under that circumstance. It was in a movie. Wow. It was part of a script. Wow. It was succinct. But it said everything that needed to be said to understand what occurred in the scene and what occurred in the minds and the hearts of the people in that courtroom. And if we cannot understand our lives, our country, our citizenry, in plain and succinct terms, if on the other hand, everything is kind of a mechanism to obscure clarity, that is really a red flag. And I think that we all need to give that some thought. And that was when I was referring to earlier about things that you see in the film. That's what it was for me on this occasion seeing the film. I didn't think that when I was in Fort Scott 6 months ago and saw it. But I was drawn right to it, just given
And again, that
our
scene
current
was filmed
circumstances.
in what year?
68.
68.
Yeah.
Oh, that 68, it was filmed in 68. Profound and bold and bold and made it plain. And then you talked about what this whole movement did for a town. Uncle Gordon didn't even want to go back until that town desegregated the cemetery. So we're talking about what this movement, I call it, did for a town. And here we are. For such a time as this, I asked Kyle last night when we went to get some food, Is it time for a resurgence of the learning tree? I'm about to do some stuff here. We have my dear brother, Antonio Richardson, who is my partner on so many things. We were in Fort Scott. He came to Fort Scott. Producer, photographer, director, visionary extraordinary. He's the photographer who works with Jamie and I in the legacy class, the photographer of the scholars. He was a photographer the director of the play, Telvin, asked, he said, Robin, do you think we can get some photographs for the play of Gordon's photographs? I said, we'll never get to the play done if we try to get permission from the foundation. And he thought, well, what if we recreated some of the imagery? He said, you know a photographer? Antonio Richardson. And if you saw the play, oh my God, what he did.
Phenomenal.
So you've got what? Scenes where you're click.
Yeah, there's a scene, well, there's multiple scenes where Gordon gets his camera and is taking photos, and Antonio was able to capture exactly what I was getting on stage. Right. I don't even know when he did it, because he wasn't on stage with me.
Right.
But he had the poses and everything down. And other people even thought that he had an eye similar to Gordon. I noticed a lot of people in the audience would say they thought Gordon had taken those pictures.
Brilliant. So we're doing some things, but he came, and we, for years, Jamie and I, we had one of her colleagues that would come in and take the essay portraits of the scholars. And cool, very, very powerful. But Antonio took it to a whole nother level. What we do with this movement of In the Footsteps of Gordon Parks and Gordon Parks' legacy work here, whole nother level. You know, Uncle Gordon's dear friend James Baldwin said, it's time for lovers of humanity to find one another. That's what we're doing. That's what this partnership is about, Amy. Lovers of humanity, finding one another. I'm so excited to announce, many years ago, I had this vision of Uncle Gordon standing again in downtown St. Paul with a statue or a memorial. We're starting that up again. He will stand in Landmark Plaza. We're starting that. That's going to happen. My dear sister, Debbie Montgomery, when she was city council member, she said, if Snoopy can be on parade, we can sure have a statue of Gordon Parks. We will have that. I plan to have a mighty vision council of visionaries who walked with Gordon Parks. So you better be ready to come on back. We're going to figure out. We ain't going to have you drive. We're going to figure out. I know it was a long plane trip, but I am calling upon that vision council to ensure that we do have a resurgence of the learning tree and, again, a mighty, mighty movement in the footsteps of Gordon Parks. Thank you all. Thank you all for being with us. We have one more question coming? Okay. I mean, hey, we're at your house, Amy, so you kick us out. She may say to us, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get out of here. So as long as she just... Okay, we have time for one more, she said.
Oh, for Kyle.
Yes.
Who are you?
I'm Aaron.
It's my brother, Aaron.
I'm the great nephew of Gordon Parks.
Yeah.
All the way from California.
My sister Robin, she's doing great things. How many times have you seen the movie? And what does it hold your attention every time you watch it later and later?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I don't watch it that often. I mean, it's usually at an event like this, or perhaps, a friend of mine wants to see it, so we sit down and watch it. But, it's infrequent. And I'm the kind of guy that doesn't have a DVD collection. I got lots of records, but I don't collect films like, oh, I got that one, checklist. But they are important to me, and I retain them. I was just this past week with my wife. There's a little film society that exists in our community. And it's at the Armory out in Santa Clara, kind of an adjacent community. And it's not a theater. It's just, you know, it's like AV in high school. They pull the screen up and got a little DVD projector thing. But the film we watched, and I had never seen it before. I don't know how I had gotten this far in life without seeing Judgment at Nuremberg. And again, you know, just the resonance of that in our time. You know, this is a film that was done in 1960, and it's in black and white, and it's an absolutely remarkable cast. It's one of I feel one of the greatest ensemble performances I've ever seen in a Hollywood movie, particularly from that time, because, you know, the 50s, the 60s was kind of a time of spectacle and, you know, kind of the the entertainment value, the box office, the et cetera, et cetera. This was just a masterful film. And I was seeing it for the first time, and I'm going like, this could have been released yesterday. You know, I mean, it's remarkable to me how films can have that effect, you know, and I've seen it this once, I'm not going to forget it. And I think that most of the films that I've seen that I feel have an impact, I might have only seen them one time, but I can remember it right now. So, yeah, so I see it from time to time, but, you know, years could go by in between. Yeah.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you all. I'd love to thank our guests. Devin's here. Hey, thank you for everything. Alicia, who was with the Landmark, who can't be with us, she's just been an angel. And Amy, again, thank you. Thank you all. My brothers, oh my goodness. Thank you so much.